I think most of us at this point agree that Belal Muhammad should be the number one contender in the welterweight division. I mean, it's pretty obvious. The guy's unbeaten in his last 9 fights. And, you know, the argument here is that Colby Covington should be the number one contender. It looks like he's going to be the number one contender per the president of the company, Dana White.
Obviously, we had Colby Covington cage side. He wants to fight Leon in July. I'm curious if that's a fight you're interested in, or do you need to see how it plays out?
Yeah, I don't know when we'll do it, but yeah, that's the fight that makes sense. And Colby came here and cut weight, you know, and did everything to be here for this fight. He deserves the fight.
So, I mean, it looks like that's set in stone at this point. But why? I mean, listen, I'm not here to hate on Colby. Nothing against the guy, even though a lot of people definitely have something against him. 2-2 in the last 4 fights. That, to me, should not grant you a title fight in the top of the top. You know, one of the top divisions and the top promotions in the world. It shouldn't be. That should not be enough. Belal Muhammad's a guy who has not lost in his last 9 fights. He's beaten 3 guys in the top 10 in his last 3 fights. Colby lost to Usman a couple times. He beat Masvidal, who's still in the top 10. But other than that, it was Tyron Woodley, who's not even in the UFC anymore. The proof is in the pudding. And besides that, if you want to look at activity, Colby hasn't fought in over a year. Belal Muhammad's fought 2 times since the last time we saw Colby. I mean, every metric you want to look at pretty much indicates that Belal Muhammad should be next. Why he's not next? There may be a couple reasons. You know, the most glaring one, the most obvious one is it's the UFC, right? It's the top promotion in the world. And a lot of times it seems like certain fighters get the nod over other fighters. These certain fighters being ones that are more known, more famous, you know, more popular. I mean, you could look at it right away. Belal Muhammad has about, 350,000 subscribers on Instagram, or followers rather. 350,000 followers for Belal Muhammad on Instagram. Colby Covington has over 1 million. So Colby has about, 3 times the amount of followers that Belal has. On Twitter, it's around the same. Colby has 400 and something K. Belal has 100 and something K. That's a big metric for the UFC, and I get it because you want to sell pay-per-views. That's the name of the game, right? But you also need to have an infrastructure in place. Otherwise, it's going to become a circus. It's going to become a zoo. There's certain circumstances, right? If you were to have Conor McGregor, let's say, in the top 10 and he wanted to fight for a title, he gets a win, maybe you grant that. But this is nowhere near that. It doesn't have a win in his last 4 fights over anyone in the top 5 of the division, you know? And that also might be the knock on Belal Muhammad. You know, Belal Muhammad, I can't figure in my head anytime he beat somebody in the top 5. I can't think of it. Maybe the Luque fight, because I think Luque was 5 or 6 around that point. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. But besides that, hasn't fought anyone really in the top 3 of the division. Hasn't fought anyone in the top of the top, like the Leons, the Kamarus, the Hamzats, or even the Gilbert Burns for that matter. But regardless, I mean, Leon Edwards got a title shot without fighting anyone in the top 5, if I'm not mistaken. And he wasn't very active at the time. So listen, Belal, a guy who has not lost again in his last 9 fights, that when there's no clear contender in the welterweight division, there really isn't. And there has to be somebody next, right? There's got to be a pecking order. Naturally, Belal Muhammad should be next. And again, a lot of people maybe aren't the biggest fans of the guy. You know, there's definitely a thing on Belal Muhammad out there. There's something about him that a lot of people just don't like, or they seem to just downplay him every time. Like, oh, Belal, screw that. You know, he's boring. Or even Colby says who. You know, there's something about Belal that a lot of people just aren't following. They really just don't want to. It's not resonating with the fans. But regardless, this is still a sport with an infrastructure, I would think. What more does a guy have to do at this point? I don't get it, man. Honestly, it's shocking. Let's rewind a year ago in terms of the conversation around Colby Covington. What was it at that time? Colby was not going to fight for a title at that time. Everyone was saying, Colby himself was saying, I'm going to beat Masvidal, which he did. Then I'll go fight Dustin Poirier. You know, he wanted Dustin Poirier, and Colby wasn't thinking about a title shot at that point. After the Masvidal fight, he was calling out Dustin Poirier.
I just took care of Miami street trash. Now it's time to take care of Louisiana swamp trash. Where you at, Dustin Poirier? You said it's on site. Name the site, Dustin.
So what happened? He went to court with Masvidal. You know, this whole thing happened. He's gone for a while, and now all of a sudden he decides that he should be fighting for the title again. I get it that the champion is a different guy now. I understand that, but man, I mean, listen, and Colby as well. We've seen the guy fight for the title twice already. I'm not saying I wouldn't love to see Colby fight for the title again, but can we get some fresh blood in there? It'd be nice to see Belal Muhammad fight for the title. The guy has never fought for a title. He's well-deserved. If Colby ends up fighting for the title, I don't get it. I really don't get it, and I think a lot of fans don't get it either. I've seen a lot of this backlash on Twitter about how it should be Belal. I saw John Anik put up a poll of who Leon Edwards should be fighting next for the welterweight championship, and it was like Belalmuhammad with the 45% votes. He had 45% of the votes. He was the favorite in that poll. So, I mean, listen, I hope Dana White changes his mind. We have the Masvidal-Burns fight coming up. If Masvidal wins, at that point, it makes more sense to do the Covington fight than Masvidal if you're going to do that. I mean, just because Covington beat Masvidal, it doesn't make sense. Covington's in the top 5, Masvidal's not. Not here to hate on Masvidal, but I'm just saying it's a whirlwind. What would make it easier if you just gave Belalmuhammad the next shot? The guy's been calling for it, but more than that, he's deserving of it. And I think a lot of you guys agree with me. And, for the people that don't, I'd be really curious to see why you think otherwise, because it's a good topic of discussion, but for me, ultimately, man, I don't see why Belal shouldn't be fighting for a world championship next.